but there it is.
Hello. Welcome everybody who's seeing this to the bi-weekly Backdrop users group meeting. Uh, I'm going to do a quick round of introductions and end with Tim, who will introduce our topic, which I've been uh, informed is going to be domain access, but we'll let Tim do that explanation. My name is Luke McCormick. I'm in Martinez, California, which is kind of near San Francisco. I go by Cell Ear on most of the things, and I'll just leave it at that. And I'll toss it to Robert, who is unmuted. When you're done, Robert, toss it to someone else.
Yep. Okay. Good night, everyone. Then Robert Gorrigos, and I'm based in some 40 kilometers north of Barcelona in Catalonia, and I'm working on Drupal lately a lot more than before because of my broken fibula. So I'm a stack on a coach. And who's next? Justin?
Hello, I'm Justin Kaiser. I'm in Muncie, Indiana, and I have already git cloned the config direct save, so I'm going to start playing with that. How about Tim?
Okay, my name's Tim Erickson. I'm St. Paul Tim on the internet, but I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota. And used to be in St. Paul. We have a beautiful fall day. And I will be talking to you in a little bit about domain access. Martin, did you go yet? Martin's struggling to find his unmute button. There, he got it.
Hi, I'm Martin Price. I'm a Backdrop developer in Northeast England, United Kingdom, and I have been involved in the domain access for a while, trying to support it and help to get a successful port going. So, but I've been out of the loop for a little while, so I'm keen to see the progress.
Who hasn't went yet?
Hi, I'm Izzy. I'm on the west coast of Canada in Vancouver, freelance developer. I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Steve, did you go yet?
Not yet, no. I'm Steve Morehouse. I've been in sort of using Backdrop as a developer and hosting them for a number of years now, as well as for Drupal as well. I'm more or less dead centre in the UK, in a place called South Yorkshire. Over to
I think that's it. Or
yeah,
Nate.
that's it, apart from Nate.
The real Nate.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch, and I'm the technical lead on the Backdrop project. I don't normally join this meeting, so I'm just lurking today and interested in hearing how domain access is going. So that's it for me. Back to you, Tim.
Okay, great. So how many people here have used the domain access module before? Sort of shake, yeah, you can nod or shake your head. Luke has, Robert hasn't, Martin has. I know Izzy's been helping in the issue queue a bit, so yeah, he raised his hand. Justin, yes or no? Have you ever used domain access?
No, but I'm
No.
interested.
Okay. Yeah,
I want to point out that I recently used it for a project over the summer and was heavily involved with it, of stripping it out. So I know some,
Okay.
don't know some, know what I don't know.
Okay. It occurs to me maybe we should have done some like Backdrop Live announcements, but since we've already dived into this, let's keep going. We will talk about Backdrop Live a little bit at the end. So save your questions.
No, tell them the dates now. Don't wait. They might not be there at the end.
Okay. I will at least remind people that it starts a week from today, in the morning. It's events. If you haven't registered yet or looked at the schedule, it's events.backdrop.org. Yeah, you're right, Luke. Let's go ahead and look at the schedule together really quick, because I'm excited about quite excited about our schedule. We've had the the most this is Backdrop Live is an unconference, meaning that anybody can suggest and host a topic. And we've actually opened up a third room for pretty much every time slot because the first two rooms were filling up. Backdrop Live, for those of you who haven't participated, is in 3-hour blocks that are staggered, sort of 3 hours on, 3-hour break, 3 hours on. The idea was to go 24 hours. What we're finding is that Block C, usually Block D has been pretty dead. This year we're getting some activity there in Block D, but Block C is empty. I'm kind of inclined to cancel Block C. Because there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest. This would be late in the evening in the US. It would be in the middle of the night or very early morning in the UK, in Europe, or this block would be well suited for people, I think, like in Australia or Asia, but we don't really have many participants from there. So, and if we cancel that, then I have at least one block when I can sleep. Because I think I'm going to try to actually get up in the middle of the night and go to Block D this year because I want to be there with some of my colleagues from Bangladesh. Anyways, I don't know if anybody has any questions about this. We do have like a German speaking group that will be meeting during Block D. It's one of the, I think we did it last time too, but we've moved from being Friday and Saturday to being Thursday and Friday. And so our Friday schedule is filling out a little bit fuller than it has in the past, but a lot of great topics, Drupal 7 migrations. Nate, if you're still lurking, I don't know that I ever coordinated anything with you. So if there's a particular session and a time slot you want to do something, let's get it on the schedule. The Backdrop CMS 1.3 or 1.30 release roadmap, I don't know, would be a great one for you to be involved in. So if this is a bad time slot, we could move it. But
No, looks good.
okay. But I just sort of threw that on the schedule because I think we need to have something like that. But if there's something else you want to do, Nate, let us know. Anyways, so please look over the schedule. I'll go ahead and make this final pitch, which is we have Backdrop for beginners, 4 sessions, content types and fields, views, layouts, and themes. I would love to have somebody else help do those. We don't have commitments from anybody to present those yet. And in a pinch, I can step in and do most of them, but and I do some training, and I'm sort of torn between like the advantage of doing them all together as practice for myself, but on the other hand, I'd like to get more people involved, and so there's some other topics here that I really plan to participate in. So for particularly layouts, would somebody step forward and do the layouts? Please let me know. You don't have to be. And I think we can help. I have we have kind of a rough outline of what each of these sessions should cover. And, most of these are topics that, those of us in the room are all pretty familiar with. So, and there will be other people there to help you out if you have questions. Okay, let's go ahead. Any questions about Backdrop Live since we dove so deep into it? Nope. Okay. Then let's jump into our topic, domain access. So I agreed to do this at the last minute, realized once again we didn't have a scheduled topic. And the domain access module, sort of the update, well, what the domain access module does is it allows you to use a single database and a single code base for multiple sites. And to help stress sort of how this works, comparing it to multi-site is something it's often confused with. And multi-site and domain access serve very unique and different needs, okay? And so this little chart will sort of help us understand what it is. I'll show you a couple of sites that used it, that I've worked with domain access on, and how they've used it as case studies, and then we'll look at the actual module and talk about where it is. There is actually no release for the domain access module for Backdrop yet, but it's very, very close. And hopefully before Backdrop Live, we will have a release. So the big thing about the difference between domain access and, say, multi-site is that in multi-site, what you're doing is sharing a single code base, but you're having different databases for each site on it. And that really, the rest of this all falls from that. In that, but to help to get the point here, the point with domain multi-site is really there if you want to have multiple websites, but you're hosting several different websites and you'd like to only maintain one code base. Okay. And that's your primary concern. Then I think multi-site is a viable and good option for you. You have a single code base, but you have different, and for those of you who haven't used multi-site, you have a different database for each site. So each site has its own content, its own users, its own configuration. It's just sharing a single code base. It does allow you to have different module directories for each site. Or you can share modules across sites, and we're not going to get into that, but but basically, it's the code is the thing you're sharing. You're not sharing content. You're not sharing logins, nothing or config. Every site functions as an independent site. Domain access is really designed to share content across multiple domains. It also shares users. Now you have the ability. It doesn't have to share all of your content. What it allows you to do is to post a node and say, okay, I want this particular node to show on sites A and B, but not C. Or and the same thing, you can have users that are limited to one site, or users that are limited to another, or some users can have full access to both sites. So fairly complicated module, but it gives you that kind of flexibility. That's the use case. So it's primarily that case where you're sharing users. It's like in some ways, it's a single sign-on option. It's a way to allow users to sign on to multiple sites. If I think it's more used though in the cases that I've used it's had a lot to do with content sharing. Let's go ahead and look at like an example of a site that I've worked on in the past. I'm not currently involved in, but this is Minnesota Bride, and this is really a publication. This is a Drupal 10 site that uses domain access, but the concept is all the same. They have the company that does this also has Arizona Bride, California Wedding Day, Nebraska Wedding Day, Oregon Wedding Day, and you'll notice if I click on any of these. The look is basically the same. It's just the content is partially different. It's, each one of these has a geographic focus, but some of the content, it's all being edited by the same staff, right? So we don't have, if we had different groups of editors for each one of these sites, the logic for domain access might be less. But because the same group of people are editing multiple versions of the site, this allows them to log into one site and manage content across their entire brand or network of sites. It allows them to post a lot of the content is geographic specific. I don't know if I can find one of these that actually in the title it'll say they'll have an article or a photo shoot of a wedding in Wisconsin, right, in La Crosse, and that's very specific to the Wisconsin site. But they might also have an article that's just about new trends in wedding dresses that they can share that across all their sites, and they can update it and edit it in one place, and it will display in multiple domains. So that's really the use case for this. I'm going to pause for a second to see if anybody has questions yet. Anybody? No? If somebody else could help watch, if anybody's raising their hand, let me know because I won't notice. Don't worry about raising your hand. Just jump in and interrupt me. We are already using Backdrop or domain access on a Backdrop site, and it is it's a site that we thought was a better candidate for domain access than maybe it ended up being. And I'll explain in a second, but this is a nonprofit called the African Development Center in Minnesota. They were opening a branch in Nevada. And here's the Nevada site. Again, this is a Backdrop site that is currently using domain access. I say this might not have been so good of it's kind of in the gray area in terms of whether or not it was worth doing this in domain access. We thought it was going to be a good candidate because as we set out to develop the sites, to add the second site, we thought that the content would be, that a lot of the content would be the same on both sites. And rather than, and it's a single, the manager, the sites are being maintained by the same people. So rather than giving them two different sites that they would have to log in and update content on two different sites that look very similar but have slight differences, we thought it would be good to use domain access, and then they could just modify the content they want from site to site. Now, I question whether or not, in retrospect, whether or not it was a good choice for this site, because it turned out that almost every page has at least something different about it. So there's almost no pages that were, there are a few. There's some content that's being shared directly between both sites, but most of the content has at least something that's different from site to site. So we still have the benefit of the site editor being able to log in to either the Nevada or Minnesota site and sort of manage the content on both sites. We have that advantage. We do, like some of the profiles, some of the staff or board members are involved in both sites, and we're able to sort of use their bios on both sites without having to maintain them in two different places. But it turned out that a lot of the other content is repeated. Now, the downside of domain access is that there's a little bit of extra complexity for the site editor. And so I would still say, like, okay, so we're not using it to its full potential. It doesn't hurt anything. Well, it hurts something in that it adds some complexity to the site editor in terms of like having to assign nodes to specific domains, which isn't intuitive if you're doing that with all of your content. If most of your content is being shared, then like, oh, you like that ability to just assign this one node to one publication and not to the other. But if it turns out you're doing that all the time, then it becomes just an extra step, right? And for that reason, I'm having some second thoughts about whether or not we should have recommended domain access. I feel like if we ever decided to, it wouldn't be hard. We could really literally just clone the site and then delete, all have the original be Minnesota, clone the site, give it its own database and code base, and just sort of delete the Minnesota stuff and disable domain access. So we could split them apart without too much work, but we haven't went that far yet, and I'm not sure that we will. Again, I'm going to pause, see if there's any questions. A use case for multi-site is quite different. Like the people I know that use multi-site are mostly like developers that are hosting sites for clients. And like they don't want, they want to be able to update 10 client sites at once, right? Without having to update core on 10 different client sites when these sites are very similar. But each of the client sites are completely unique, right? They have their own editors, their own content, their own users. There's nothing shared across from a data perspective. So a lot of these developers will set up something like multi-site, and they'll have 10 completely independent sites with independent databases that all refer to a single code base. So the code is all coming from one place. That's a different use case than domain access. Okay. I don't know, Justin, I think you might use multi-site for some of your, that's another use case for a multi-site would be an organization like Justin's that maybe has 10 Backdrop sites. But they're unique enough that they're not sharing content. So that's not their goal. They're not sharing content or users, but they don't want to manage 10 different code bases. So they might use something like multi-site. Okay, so to a little bit of the history of the module, I think it goes back to Drupal 6 or before, but it's been around for a while. It has it's a complicated module, and it has a whole network of, or a bunch of first of all, it comes with about 8 submodules in the main domain access module that you can enable or disable depending on your needs. But if you're using this, you're going to quickly find out that there are certain things that you can and can't do that you might want to do with domain access that you can't without another contrib module. And so this is, if I search for domain on Drupal.org, you can see domain access entity type. That's a domain route access, domain access logo. Most of these domain bonus, most of these are contrib modules that enhance and extend the domain access module, much the same way the commerce or UberCart has, a whole bunch of modules that extend, and domain access also has that. As we go down here, there's just a whole bunch of modules with domain. Not all of these are domain access modules, but a lot of them are. Probably most of them are. And I think if you look at any of their pages, you'll see that they're dependent on or contribute. This one might. This may or may not be one. I don't know. But anyway, so there is a whole network of modules here. I've worked, it's a practical module. I've run into other use cases and used this module with other clients as well, but I'm not going to go into that. People like myself have been sort of hoping for domain access for Backdrop for years. And there have been periodic requests for it. This last year, well, we started a port for ADC Minnesota, and well, we basically ported the module, but we got to a stage where we were kind of in a rush, and we were making some hacks that we didn't want to put into a contrib module, and so we ended up getting this site working with domain access, but not quite ready to share the code publicly. Martin, who's here, was also interested. I think Martin was the one who actually set up the domain repo, if I recall, and had maybe made an attempt himself to start to port the module.
Yeah.
Right. But there were a bunch of bugs, and that got stalled. So I had been intending to work. Well, we had released the code that we used for ADC onto Backdrop.org, or as the contrib project, but it was buggy without sort of some of the stuff, the hacks that we had done on our site. And so it was, as other people, if you just tried to use our version of the domain module without our hacks, it was pretty buggy and didn't work. And then along came, and I forget his name.
Rodobaldo Perez Matias.
So,
I think I've got the pronunciation right.
So the name that Martin just said, he sort of showed up recently and said, "Hey, I ported domain access," and we decided that after I think Martin and maybe Izzy has also been helping to test these modules out, and after I think Martin, actually my team might have helped with this as well, which was sort of to test this new port, and we found that the new port seemed to be working a little smoother than the one we already had. So we pretty much just replaced the work we had done with this new port. There's still a whole number of bugs. Again, we haven't released it yet. Over the past week, my team, we needed at least 3 other contrib modules for domain access for our ADC project. So we had ported 3 other helper modules, and this week I worked with my team to actually create beta releases of those, even though domain hasn't been released. But my argument was that if somebody installed domain access to test it on their site, if we had beta releases of these other modules, they could easily download them through the project browser and help test those as well. They are definitely beta. They may be a little bit buggy, but they generally seem to do what they're supposed to be doing. And we do expect, I'm hoping we can come out with a release on domain access soon. I've installed, this week, my team has been replacing what we did on ADC with the contrib version to just see how does it work on an actual real website that's using domain access, and we haven't been finding any problems. I mean, we found a few problems, but we were able to get past them all, and they were, simple things. So I think, once we can sort of confirm that it's working on this site, then we'll have to look. There are a bunch of open issues, and we'll just have to see if any of those, and I'll be looking, Martin, for your input on that. Like, what of those other issues are blockers to, say, doing like a beta release, so that more people. I'm of the belief that we'll get more people actually testing it if we get like a beta release out than we will if it's just sitting there in GitHub.
Yeah, I think there is if I recall, there is a significant blocker at the moment with regards to updating Backdrop when you've got it enabled. So,
okay, yeah, I think I saw that issue, and we were going to try to verify that issue and then see if we had any thoughts on fixing it. But we have updated the ADC site, so I guess I'm not convinced that might not be easily fixed. It could be something that we had to hack to get it to work, and maybe we can share our hack or use that to come up with a better solution. So that's kind of the status. There are, if I go to backdrop.org and I search for domain, you'll see the top three: domain path, domain views, and domain menu access are the three modules that we've released. And I can show you what some of them do in a minute. I'll actually do a demonstration. I got excited because I saw this domain registration that had just come out, and I thought, oh, somebody else has released a domain access module. But this, I think, is not a domain access module. It just has domain in the title. So it says Jen released this module recently. It allows or restricts registration based on an email address domain. So I think this is addressing something very different. So do be careful about that. Don't assume that just because domain is in the title that it's a domain access module. But I do think, like, if you go to Drupal, there is a whole bunch of modules that could be added, and they cover kind of unique niche cases. So in addition to sort of showing you the back end and how it works on a dev site, I guess the other thing is that we are at a stage where if anybody wants to help fix a number of the bugs. Here, let's just do something like this. Domain path, project page. There we go. If we get rid of the machine name, it's domain access is what we refer to the module, but it's just domain as terms of a machine name. Oops, not code here. So we've got like 20 open issues right now. I mean, some of these are probably more a little meta-ish. I opened up an issue yesterday that I found some undefined array keys. So these are not actually breaking the site, but they're kind of warnings and things that might be relatively easily fixed. I haven't looked into them yet, but if anybody wanted to help us at least get some of the low-hanging fruit here and identify which issues might be blockers, we could probably get this module ported soon. There was somebody who emerged recently who offered a bounty for people working on the domain access module, and it happens to be a gentleman that I've worked with in the past who has his entire business is built around a website that is built on Drupal 7 and the domain access module. He definitely is a supporter of open source, and I think is somebody who would, if anybody wanted to reach out to him, and there might be opportunities for him to support some work on this module. It's a little bit awkward though right now because we're so close to sort of launching it anyways, that I'm not quite sure what we might simply do is encourage him to make a little donation to Backdrop once we get it out. But he has also made it pretty clear that he doesn't want to adopt it until he's confident that other people have given it a thorough testing. So, but the point is there are quite a few Drupal 7 users, that's Drupal 7 sites, I think, that are using it. It was a pretty popular module, and I think there are a number of sites out there that have not come to Backdrop, at least so far, because of the lack of this site, of this module. I have had some sites that I didn't consider Backdrop for because of the lack of domain access. The Minnesota Bride site, I was involved in that in the past, and I never really considered Backdrop for that site just because they really needed domain access, and I wasn't sure I was ready to undertake the porting of it at the time. So I hope there's still some of those sites out there. So if there's no other questions, let's jump in. I actually have a dev site set up and something. So I created a local site called Domains. It's called Demo. That's right. This will be a good use case of something to show you to be aware of. But the domain is Domains, and then I wanted to make another domain, and I wasn't doing too creative, so I just called it the Remains. So I have Remains and Domains. There's two different domains. The only thing I've done on these are local. They're DDev sites, and I'm going to go ahead because a lot of us use DDev and point out how to run, because how do you run two different domains in a site? And actually, what I should do is encourage people to use the wiki. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the wiki, including if we go to this, I think needs to be cleaned up a bit. It's a bit confusing, the navigation of it. But there are these. I'll also mention that in addition to the 3 modules that we ported and did beta releases of, menu access paths and views, there is a module called domain entity, which we thought we were going to need. We started the process to port it. We did it, like ran it through Coder Upgrader and stuff. We created a repo for it, but then we realized we didn't need it. I'm assuming that what it does is extends this ability to assign domains or entities to domains beyond like nodes. I think the domain path, the base domain access lets you assign any individual node to a domain, and I think this module is just going to help extend that to other custom entities. But we have done very little work on it. It's just, but there is a space, there is a repo for it. I think it's here. So somewhere there's a link to some documentation for DDev. If you want, maybe this is where it was. Okay, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to show you the YAML, the change you make to your YAML file. So this, I'm using Sublime text here. And if you want to try out domain access, you really spin it up the way you normally would. However, if we go into, where's the DDev folder? Up here, into the DDev folder, there is a config.yaml. And basically the thing I had to do was add here. My base domain is up here in domains, and this was the additional domains is there by default in the default YAML file. But if you don't do anything, there's little closed brackets to show that you don't have any. I just deleted those and I added my additional domain, and you can add as many as you want. So I could do other subdomains, or I could create subdomains. I'm setting these up as subdomains. They could be completely independent domains. But anyways, you can add as many as you want there. And that's the only thing I had to do with DDev, was simply add that to get it to work. So now I'm running these two, well, there's one instance, but I'm accessing it through two different domains. The other tricky thing you have to do when you enable the module is you also have to go into your settings.php, and you have to include this line in your settings.php. And this has tripped a number of people up who've been trying to test this. It's not getting this right. So, Martin, do you have anything to add on this? Because I think you've dealt with this problem before.
I think the key for this is just sort of read the documentation and make sure that if you've in particular if you've got like subfolders within your modules folder that says I'm going to put contrib in here and custom in here, make sure that your path reflects that. I thought it would also be worth mentioning I use Lando, and it's quite easy to add it into Lando. You just add it as a proxy domain for the additional domains in Lando, and that works really well as well. So it's relatively easy to develop develop using domain in Lando.
Okay. I'm impressed to see that. So the domain module comes with a very lengthy install.txt file, which most modules don't have. That's in addition to the normal README. The README is fairly brief, but it has this long install text, and it will cover a lot of the things that you have to be concerned about. Then there's an install quick start. I have not read through all of this stuff. I was able to set this up really with only worried about those two things, adding this one thing to the settings.php and the ddev. None of the other things factored in for me, but they might, especially if you have existing sites that you're adding this to. You may, as Martin said, really want to dig through this. Or if you have anything weird about your configuration, you might have other issues, and hopefully they're addressed here. I'm impressed to see that there's information in here about B already. I don't know, Martin, if you added that or if the porter added the B stuff.
I think Izzy added it.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to point out while you're talking about this,
Yeah.
is that what I did was I moved all of these install, because every submodule that's in here, I moved into the wiki. And so I didn't go back. I did start updating this for Backdrop, but then we discussed it in Zulip and stuff and thought that with this much documentation, it should be in the wiki.
Yeah.
And, I have mixed feelings because people may start to look for it here. We'll either have to delete it from the module or do like what B has done and have a subdirectory for the docs and move it all into there. So, that's an open question in my mind. But the wiki has all the same things. In 1A, the DNS configuration, you will find that information about ddev. And if you go down, you will see under item 4, you'll see each of the helper modules. And this was stuff taken out of the module directories, the submodules, and put into the wiki. So the wiki is more up to date in terms of editing for Backdrop. And we just have to decide where this much documentation is best handled.
Sure. I share your mixed feelings on this. I think I would lean towards relying on the wiki, but I understand the pros and cons of that. So I would just say that I'd like, when I mentioned earlier, I'd like to clean this up a bit. I find that it's too flat. Like if we could get an install page and then have each individual thing be a subpage of that, which I think there's a way to do, it would help me navigate it better. Right now, it's like I'm looking for, I remember, I know there's ddev instructions here somewhere, or at least a link to that, but because everything's at the same level and nothing, I don't know where to look for it.
Yeah, it's in the DNS configuration.
Okay.
So it seems.
Yeah, there it is. And all it is a link to that, but to the page, but still that page is helpful. It's really, you just have to find that YAML page and add the. Okay. Well, thank you for doing that though, Izzy. That's really valuable to get that documentation stuff up to date. Does anybody else have had any experience installing it? Because again, I got this site running pretty easily with it yesterday, but adding it to an existing site, especially if you have anything strange about your your configuration, your server configuration, or if you're trying to do it on shared host, you might run into weird problems. This is doing some tricky stuff with handling of domains. And so it isn't the kind of module where you just install it and it works on most occasions. You're probably going to have to do a little bit of massaging.
I think partly because one of my use cases involves using the domain themes module, but also having the domain themes module enabled means it's very easy to see whether you've got your config right, and it's and it's picking up that it's a different domain or not. When you switch between the domains, you can very visually easily see if it's done if you've got a different theme on each one.
And we're going to do that in a second. I've got the two set up, and we're going to actually configure them. So in addition, you can have, while you're sharing the example I gave, for example, of Arizona Bride, they have pretty much the same theme in every one of their sites. But you could easily imagine where they might have done the same thing but had a different color scheme, say for each site, or they could have completely different themes. I think for the ADC site, we actually created different sub-themes for each of the projects, although they're also very similar other than the logo is changing. But still, you can create different sub-themes, and then you can assign different sub-themes to each. I'm going to show you a little bit. So this is again, the domains and remains are the same site, but two different operating under different domains. And to actually see kind of how this works, the first thing, I don't think I even enabled the module. I rebooted, maybe I did. Yeah, I did enable the module. So this is what comes with the basic module. All these other modules are submodules that come with domain access. I haven't installed either of the other three that we ported yet, and I don't know if we'll get to those today. I might just describe what they do. But once we do this, here we go. Under structure, we have a domains menu. And this is where you can create additional domains. So right now, I can access the site from two different domains, but I can't assign content to different domains because I haven't configured domain access to do that yet. And I'm primarily going to do that just by doing this. I'm going to put the remains.edev.site, and we'll call this remains, and save that. And I think, is that one of those non-fatal errors? So we've now set up. Now I want to change the name of the demo site, and this is a good example of where the kinds of things as you're trying to configure this. You might think, well, I'll change the name of the site and go to the normal place, system, site information. And if I try to change the site name here, it's actually not going to let me do that. It looks like it's done it, but I think if I refresh, did it let me do that? I go to the home page. It did not let me do that last night. So, but if what I had to do last night, and I'm not sure what the difference is and why, I won't dwell on it, but what I had to do yesterday was go in and change it here. I don't know, it's possible I had already changed it here. I don't know. But anyways, there will be some settings that altering them might be a little different than you normally have to with the domain access. One of those is going to be themes in just a second. I'll show you that. But in a case like that, where when I couldn't change the name of the site in the regular place, I just came to this domain setting. I did it here, and then it worked. So now we have, here, it's remains that is demo. That's why. So this is the default one. So I think here, if I try to change it, no, it is the site name. So the site name is remains. Go to domains. and it's showing up there. But it's still showing up on the site as, wasn't it? As
I think
this
this
is
is
domains.
one of the things. Sometimes you'll edit something and it'll jump you back to the main site. And you
Yeah,
have
so
to keep an eye out. That's where another place where the theme one can help.
yeah, so once we've changed the theme, that'll help. I don't know. A minute ago, I was still seeing the demo here. Now I'm seeing the new names in both. So, but let's actually do the theme thing because that's, I think, significant. So did we, I think we've already enabled the domain theme comes with domain access. You have to enable it. Once you've done that, now when you go to the domains site, actually, I'm going to do one more thing. Before I do this, I've added Bootstrap 5. I'm going to go ahead and just enable that site and make it available. Now I can go to, so you might get tempted to, I have a default. This is a little bit confusing. I have a default domain, which is the domains, okay? And if I want to change the theme on domains, I should do it the normal way. But if I want to change the theme on remains, if I go to the remains site and change the theme, I'm quite sure that's not going to work. The proper way to do that is to go here to edit the domain. And under the edit domain, there's a themes tab. And this themes tab lets you pick an alternative. So we can switch to, so we have Bootstrap. Let's light selected as, let's go ahead and leave that. And then let's go back to, I'm sorry. Did this switch me again?
Yeah.
I don't remember this happening last night when I played with this. Okay,
I
so
think when you edit the domain settings, it's always takes you to the default thing. So
okay, I'll have to watch for that. And which did I decide was the default? Okay, let's remember that default is domains, and here's remains. So I'm going to go back to domains. Both of the sites are using Bootstrap right now. I'm going to go to this site. I'm going to go to edit remains. I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to change that to use basis. Okay, so what I'm expecting now is that the domains will continue to use Bootstrap, but remains will now be using basis. Let's see if that worked. There we go. Remains is using basis. But if I go back to domains, it is now using Bootstrap. So now it's a little easier to tell which site I'm on, depending on the domain. So you obviously can share a theme across it, but we don't. I think the next the last thing that I would consider a failure if I didn't demo is just to have a piece of content. And let's just add a test page. Office hours. Test content. Okay. Now, Martin, jump in. I get a little bit confused about there's this send to all affiliates, and then there's which ones do you want to publish to?
So if you've got send to all affiliates checked, then it goes to all of them, but then which one you have as published to is the like the parent of it, where that's where you'll edit the content.
Sure.
But you can deselect that and just select particular ones to send the content to.
So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and put
just on that same point. I think, and I'm not 100% positive, but if you send it to all affiliates, then I think the default will publish to your main default domain.
Okay. Well, in my experimenting with this last night, when I had send all affiliates, but published to just one of them, it still was available on both of them to unauthenticated users. And it wasn't until I deselected this that it actually, let's just go ahead and let's demo it without this checkbox checked. And then if people better understand the relationship between these two checkboxes later, please help me out. But so if we go ahead and save this, so we just added office hours to the remains. Now it's showing up here because I'm logged in as an admin. But if I take this site, the domains, and go to my other browser, it still shows up.
Have you flushed caches at all?
Probably that could be it. Let's flush
And you
the
might
cache.
have to rebuild. You might.
I might have
you've
to
got
rebuild the
a
permissions.
status
Yeah.
thing. You might have to rebuild your node access.
That is another possibility. That it does tell you from time to time to.
Yeah. So
Actually, it's right here. Rebuild permissions. So that's another thing to worry about. Let's just go here and refresh. There we go.
It is worth flagging up here that there is a Backdrop contrib module called Node Access Progressive, which is a much more probably a safer way of doing your node access rebuild, in that it will only delete it just before it replaces it. It won't. Whereas the regular node access rebuild will basically strip all the permissions away and then rebuild them. And if you've got a large site with a lot of nodes, that can take a while. So there is, and I think it is mentioned in the wiki about the node access. The progressive rebuild, which is a Backdrop contrib module.
But you will notice that after I rebuilt my permissions, I now on the domain site, that page is not available. If we actually try to go to it, we get an access denied message when I'm unauthenticated. Whereas on the remain site, the office hours page is there now available. It's been assigned to that. If I go back to the main page and I go to my content and we go to office hours and we add this to domain, let's say show it on both sites, I don't think I'm going to have to clear caches now. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong because it's not. So let's go back here. Just to verify I added it to both sites, flush all caches. Now, can I get it to show up on both? Yep, now it shows. So there is some cache clearing that has to be done. So now that node is available on both pages. So anyways, this is the really important basic thing that I think domain access does, is allow you to publish nodes to and manage them across multiple. And we've got 2 domains. There could be 8 domains, right? And we could be assigning one node to 4 of those. Node A, node B could be assigned to a different 3, and node C could be assigned to a different combination. And then that content becomes, there is the ability to segment your users by domain, or like you can give some users access to one domain and not the other, or other users can have access to both domains. Some of that functionality is in the core domain module. Some of it you might have to do logins or submodules. The other modules that we ported are, one is for views. If you want to assign a view to one domain or another, I think you might need this separate module that we ported. The other the other module that there are, so if a node has a menu item, right, that and that menu item isn't accessible on a domain, that menu item might just not show up. But there's other kinds of menu items that aren't directly related to nodes. That might be a view or a layout. Well, I might be getting in over my head there, but there are scenarios where you want to be able to assign a menu item to one domain or the other. That's not in core, and that's why we ported the domain menu access module. So in that case, you can go to a menu item, and on a menu item, you can literally edit, you can assign it to one domain or the other. That is not here yet without that additional module. What's the third one that we ported? We did views. Oh, path. I'm going to pause for a minute and then we're going to end this, and I'll show you some stuff after the recording that I don't want to do in the recording. But is there any questions before I end the recording?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind making a couple of comments
Sure,
on this.
absolutely.
I think, you know, and again, I haven't got much in the way of experience with this module, but I have been playing around with it a little bit. I think the two things I noticed about it is that it's very helpful for subdomains. So, you know, you showed us in your dev environment that you're naming things like subdomains, but your other examples that were live were actually using a full domain name. Right. They were things like ADC Nevada and Minnesota. They weren't subdomains. So you can use it for either subdomains or for a totally different domain name. And I think also, as I understand it, this is not only sharing the ability to share content, but also the configuration. So if you were creating a complex site where you've got content that you want to share or configuration, by having the domain access module, you may save yourself a lot of work. You either have to clone the whole site and maintain the different clones, or you might be able to use the domain access to create one site, tweak it, and then be able to use domain access to create your different domains. So it's been around since Drupal 5, and there are a lot of links to uses of this module. I mean, it's been very popular for affiliates like different magazines, and websites, but it's had a lot of different use cases, and I can't list them off, but if people are interested, there are links in the wiki that came out of the install. I didn't come up with them, they're there. That will help you go and explore that. The other thing I wanted to mention there is that when you're sharing content across different subdomains or domains, it may raise some questions about SEO, because you're going to have duplicate content showing up on different URLs. And I haven't been able to explore that to any depth, but it is an alert that is mentioned in.
If you go to the functionality, quickly go to the functionality list modules page, Tim, and search for domain. You
mean in Drupal?
No, in the Backdrop site, I think there is a submodule that will help with that.
Yeah, I do remember seeing like a domain SEO module or something, but I don't remember if it was a.
I think it's the source one, so which will basically say this is the canonical source for the thing. So you might have domain 2 also includes this content, but on that page, and this is something you can kind of do with probably with might help with meta tags, that it will basically say actually the canonical source for this content is domain 1. So which can help to alleviate any possible penalty for duplicate content. Because you say, yes, it's in two places, but this is the actual source. So for search engine purposes, only look at this one.
Yes, I feel like I saw some other domain related modules that maybe we haven't ported yet that might also help address, like domains meta tag might be one of them that we should be looking at. Although I have a feeling that I have to go back and review that on our.
From
in
that, I
our
did some
sites, how we're doing it.
research.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did some research a couple of months ago, probably maybe even 6 months ago now, about duplicate content. Because I was thinking the same. So I've got a couple of websites that can use the same content, and Google, from memory, I could be wrong on this, so don't hold me to it.
Yep.
Don't penalize you for duplicate content. They just don't know which to promote based on the two pages, let's say. So it will pick one, and it may not be your preferred method. So you go into the Google console type of thing to tell it which one is the main one. But I don't think Google anyway doesn't penalize you for duplicate content. It just doesn't know which one to show when people are doing searches for it. So that's one of the things to be aware of. There's a lot of scaremongering about duplicate content with Google. Again, this is probably about 3, 4, 5 months ago when I did the research. They don't penalize you for it. They just don't know which one to post or to give on search results, if that makes sense.
If I can say one more thing here, if people are just playing around with this module, it's in the documentation, but you really only need to enable the domain access module. These other ones, like you've got domain settings and so on done. You can get into them later, but if you just want to start, you can just enable the domain access module. Make sure you put the one line in your settings PHP, and make sure you rebuild your content. And then you're able to go ahead and do quite a lot of things. But then these additional ones give you more capabilities.
Right. I'm intrigued by. I went ahead and enabled some of them because I just didn't want them to trip us up during this demo. But I think that Izzy's right, that I would have preferred to just start with the domain access and add the others only if I needed them. I'm intrigued by this domain configuration, which says it's advanced site configuration options for domain access. And then we have domain settings, expanded site configuration options for domain access. So the descriptions, the short description seems almost identical. There must be some difference between them, but I have no idea what it is yet. I haven't had time to look into that.
Yeah, I think the domain settings allows you to sort of do the settings that you would in Backdrop for a site, but separately for the different domains.
It could be. What you were saying earlier, Izzy, about, I think, sharing configuration across domains is largely true. You can override it per domain, but I think it does get a bit problematic there, and I think that's sometimes where other contrib modules come in, is that if you're trying to do a certain kind of setting per domain and it doesn't work, then what you do is you go out and you look for the contrib module that will help you.
The other thing I wanted to bring up more as a question, I don't know what people would do, but when you're setting up the domain access configuration, you can also use a prefix on your database for the different subdomains or domains. And I don't know what people's thoughts are on using prefixes on the database for this kind of a use.
Are you sure about that? I know you can. I know with Backdrop you can do it, but I think that's at the whole site level. I didn't think that there was any particular splitting because they all share the same tables.
Yeah.
It's only I don't think you would use prefixes. Different prefixes for different domains because they all share the same tables.
That's my gut reaction was as well, that it doesn't make sense to me how you could add prefixes when they're really, like your node table is still your node table for both sites.
Yeah,
But-
your
but
field
you're
tables
assigning-
are all the same.
but you're assigning individual nodes to different domains. So there's no way to really prefix the node table because it's just one table. I mean, I think with multi-site,
Yeah.
I argued before that with multi-site, you just have one, or you have different databases per site. Well, I think what some people do is they have a single database, but they have prefixed, right? They have different, because you can use one database and store multiple sites in one database, but it's all segmented with prefixes. I think that's true. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think that is true.
Yeah.
But I think most hosts allow you to have multiple databases, so it's much better to avoid prefixes if you can.
I agree. I've had I had horrendous experiences with prefixes a long time ago, so I like shudder when I hear about databases with prefixes. But that could be just because I had a bad experience, not because they're a bad idea. So I think if nobody else has anything else, I appreciate Izzy and Martin sharing their experiences and thank both of them for the work they've done in these modules, as well as the Rodobaldo, who did a lot of work on this and who's not with us today. But a number of people have joined in with this. I think this will be a really nice addition to the background space.
Yeah, and I think also we should put a shout out to your team, not just you, but your other members of your team, you know, where English isn't their first language, but they have been contributing to certainly to this module and probably others.
Yes.
And so they're part of the global Backdrop community. So I think kudos to them.
Yes, I'm going to mention Sudiptu and Alamgir are two developers I've been working with who you may see their names in the issue queues around the domain module. And I'm hoping that you guys might get a chance to meet them at Backdrop Live next week. So, but they've done all of the hard work. I just get to play with it and tell them find bugs. That's what I do. Okay, let's end this. But if anybody wants to hang around, I might show you two more things if anybody's still interested. Okay, but we're going to wrap up the meeting. Bye, everybody. Any other final announcements? We got last plug for Backdrop Live. Help spread the word. Register. Anything else, people?